So if you end up getting, you'll have a lot of people that will play with it, and you'll end up getting a whole bunch of water. And my understanding is that this will actually, over time, have an evaporation cycle to it, but it's apparently real time because it doesn't happen real quickly. So what we found is after a lot of people played with it, we ended up with a lot of water that is just like, okay, we can't show them anything because everything's covered with water. So when you do the escape, Control-Alt-T, and then type in /run sandbox and hit enter, that kind of resets it. And then you do Control-F, and that will get rid of the frame. So this is what it looks like when you haven't done anything. And what I was doing to kind of get it started is I just kind of dug a river valley and made a mountain range. And we could shift that over a little bit, because that gives you a chance to talk about a lot of different things.
Oh, I see now.
Okay, so when somebody walks up, it's like, so do you want to hear what this is? This is our augmented reality sandbox, and what this does is it allows you to do kind of some real-time play to understand how topography or the lay of the land actually impacts how water flows and how things happen. So right now what we've got is we've kind of got the basic setup for a river valley. The green indicates ground level, and as going from yellow to brown to dark red, the darker the color, the higher the elevation. And if you look, you'll notice that right here those lines are really close together, whereas right here they're really far apart. What that's indicating is where it's close together, you're going up very steeply, and where they're far apart, you're kind of going up gradually and slowly. So anytime you see those lines in a topographic map, that's what it's telling you. So if the lines are really, really close together, that means that you're going up really quickly. And usually they're in like 100, usually the contours are in like 100. So they'll have little numbers next to them. So one will say like 100, and then over here it'll say something else. And so that would be 100, that'd be 200, that'd be 300, going up. And I don't go into the detail of the topography unless there's somebody who's really interested in that. I basically just tell them the green is ground level, yellow going up to brown and red is getting steeper. And if you build this tall enough, you will actually get snow on the caps of the mountains. So whenever I say that to little kids, the first thing they want to do is build a mountain. We ended up with lots of islands in the middle of the sandbox. And it just gets slightly wide at the top, which is kind of cool. So the first thing I do if you have something like this is the blue indicates where the water table is. So do you know what a water table is? A water table is where the ground is completely saturated with water, but water is not typically running from it. So think marshes and bogs and just really the kind of land that when you step in it, it wants to suck your boot off. So there is no running, the ground is saturated and completely soaked up like a sponge, soaking up water, but it's not letting a lot of it out. But if you do this, you will see it will rain in response to that, and you need to make sure you keep your hand low, because if you get it too high, it doesn't rain very well. And that's an interesting thing that can lead to discussion about some of the concerns about climate change, is that with the higher temperatures, that actually does elevate the cloud layer in some cases, and there is the potential for the cloud layer to be high enough that the rain will actually evaporate before it hits the ground. So that is a concern related to climate change, theoretically. It does happen in some deserts, and that's just a random concern to be aware of. But another thing you can tell them is, so where it's just light blue, that's the water table. Where it's sparkling water, that's where we actually have running water. Now here's another neat thing. We've got it raining, and it's raining on both sides of the mountains. On this side of the mountain where we have our river, that's one watershed. On this side over here where we have a lake or another river, that's a second watershed. They are separated by the elevation of the mountain range. So what a watershed is water wants to go from high to low, And these are two separate watersheds unless they connect somewhere later on. And that's what we mean when we're talking about different watersheds. But what's interesting is you can talk about, okay, so let's get some rain over here. Another thing that this is interesting and useful to do, we didn't get rain, come on. There we go. So once we have water in a lake, you can actually see how things interconnect. That lake can be connected to a river. And then you can have a conversation about how, okay, they're gonna connect and you're gonna have a wider area with water, but that water is probably gonna be shallower in the lake depending on how that river flows and how much water flows through that river. You can also build dams and separate water features and talk about things like that. Now, the one thing this simulation does not do is it does not explain erosion. So if you have a really tall mountain, let's do our island in the center of the thing. If you have a really tall mountain where all of the elevations are really close together, when it rains, not only do you get the water sheeting down the mountain, in real life that would also be taking the soil with it, and then you can have a conversation about sedimentation, and you can have a conversation about erosion control and why you want to set up hay bales and stuff like that when you're doing construction to avoid washing away your topsoil. And we almost have snow over here. You can see it's starting to get just a little bit white. I have seen this where somebody actually took a map and did the Chesapeake Bay, which takes far more artistic talent than I had, or patience than I had. And then you could talk about the Chesapeake Bay. But I've also, what we did is we did the Harper's Ferry, which has two ridges running kind of parallel. And you could then, this was completely unrelated to water, but they were talking about how the topography affected the Civil War battles and how weather and rain would collect and all that. So you could also do like the Shenandoah Valley and talk about the various geophysical provinces and the Blue Ridge and the valley and talk about why they're different. So, but mainly people just like to play. It's addictive, it really is.